The story continues, and we see the first sword, exhausted and maskless. He thinks about the progress that has been made in the last 6 years. In the cave, they've raised 30 out of 300 people into assassins, and they could probably take his life at any point with how well they've been trained. He feels his death is approaching and gets emotional. Then, through the door come the second and third sword. They ask the first sword why he has his mask off. He says it has become too constraining after 6 years and allows them to remove their masks as well. They gather at the table and rejoice over how their time in the cave is coming to an end. The first sword then asks for an update on the performance of the trainees. The second sword reports that they have exceeded expectations. Some are even stronger than the instructors. He says it's too much of a waste to throw them away after one use. But the first sword says they have no choice. That was one of the mission's conditions. He wants to begin the final stage and places 3 journals on the table. They gather the trainees and announce that 3 of them must learn this martial art technique, and the other 27 must assassinate the 3 that have learned the technique. This sends uncertainty through the group. The masked men announce this is their final training. Once this training is completed, they will not force anymore until they leave this place. The group questions if this is true, and Wall thinks hard about his next move. The ones who learn that martial art would have a target on their backs, and that technique is probably much more advanced than what they've already learned. He gets greedy and is the first to volunteer. Yo is shocked and asks Wall if he wants to be the scapegoat. Wall replies and says only time will tell if he's a scapegoat or a wolf. Yo warns Wall to be careful as he's now everyone's main target. Time passes, and we see the second of the 3 to learn the martial art go down. Wall elected to learn the technique, no one else volunteered, and the group was forced to draw lots. Song feels bad about what he just had to do, but he had no choice. Wall is the only survivor left out of the 3 who had to learn the technique. Song returns to the others, and Min asks about Wall. It's been a while since they've seen him and wonder if he escaped outside. Yo doubts it and says the last she saw Wall was when they were training together a few days ago. Yoke suggests taking out the instructors, as that may be easier than eliminating Wall. Song agrees but believes the real ones may have placed some sort of restriction on them. Yo says they can worry about restrictions later and need to focus on finding Wall first. They head out of the cave and watching them the whole time was Wall. He's surprised to hear that they thought about going after the instructors instead of him. Wall realizes the instructors may be pursuing the others, and there's no way they didn't monitor that conversation. He thinks now is his chance to find the objective of the real ones. Wall makes his way to the base of the real ones. The base is heavily guarded, but it's not something Wall can't get through. Wall knows that if he combines the turtle breathing technique with the thunder splitting technique, he can move while erasing his presence. Wall walks right past the guards without any issue. He reaches the deepest point of the base and assumes that what he needs is in this room. Wall opens the door and walks right in. He begins searching for any clues to discover any secrets. Then he finds a golden tube. He unrolls the scroll and finds the terms of their mission. They are to assassinate Wu Ganseng within 7 years for a reward of 500,000 yang. He is shocked and wonders how great Wu Ganseng could be for them to raise assassins for 7 years. He wants to know how taking the lives of 270 people is worth this man's 1 life. Wall then hears someone coming and knows he must make himself scarce. The first sword makes his way down the hall quickly. As soon as the first sword barges in, he can tell someone was in the room. Wall tried his best to clean up, but it was sloppy. The second and third sword entered the base and run into the first sword. The first sword says someone has infiltrated their base, and they must find them before they escape. They try to think of who could have done this, but then they realize that no one is as gifted as Wall. But they are clueless and don't even know Wall is hiding right above them. They are astonished that Wall would have the guts to infiltrate their base when everyone else is after him. They discuss punishing Wall but are afraid of a possible rebellion. The first sword says he has no choice but to use the hell flute. The second sword is shocked and says that's supposed to be a last resort restriction. The first sword asks if they are on board with the plan, and the second and third sword agree. Shortly after, the first sword stands at the edge of the cliff. The trainees have no clue what's about to happen as they are still looking for Wall. No one can track him down, not even their best trackers. Suddenly, they hear an instrument. The sound causes horrible pain in their bodies. They all fall to the ground screaming in pain. As they lay on the ground crying, Wall emerges. He feels no pain as the others feel that their bodies are on fire. Wall concludes that they have now activated the restriction. Wall looks around and sees everyone else in pain. He wonders why he's the only one pain-free. Wall wants to figure out the cause and decides to use internal energy infusion on Min. It's an extremely dangerous act, but it won't collide as much since Min has also learned the thunder-splitting cultivation technique. Wall performs his analysis on Min and sees no issues with her internal energy. He continues to search for any differences between them. They share the same food, the same environment, and the same martial arts. Then it hits him, poison. The restriction has something to do with poison, and now it makes sense why Wall feels no pain. He's acquired resistance to poison after being bitten by the snake so many times. Wall still wonders how they could affect 27 bodies at once. He thinks they must have mixed cursed poison in their food and are stimulating the poison through sound waves. He hears them call out for him and tries to think quickly. Wall decides not to run because he doesn't want them to find out about his resistance. He still doesn't want them to know he's different, so he lays on the ground and pretends to be in pain. They find Wall lying on the ground and call for the first sword. The first sword draws his blade and strikes down on Wall. The first sword wants to know what Wall was doing in his room. He also says Wall has done a great job hiding his true talents. The first sword pulls his blade out and says a nuisance like him is better off being killed right now. But the second sword begs him not to. He says they need Wall to complete their objective. The first sword responds angrily and says the other trainees are enough. They both know that isn't true, though. The second sword says they can control Wall by using the flute since he is powerless against the cursed poison. The first sword likes that idea and tells the masked men to provide everyone with the antidote. After the antidote, everyone recovers, but they don't understand what happened. The first sword announces that the pain they just went through was all because of Wall, and this would have never happened if he hadn't infiltrated their base. He warns them and says if anyone ever steps out of line again, remember the pain they experienced today. Later, we see Wall reflecting on the events that transpired. He recalls the real ones believing he was powerless against the poison. He is satisfied. The snake venom subdued the cursed poison and allowed him to avoid the restriction. But once again, Wall hears footsteps down the hall. Min and the others are looking for Wall. Yo can't believe Wall spends his time in a disgusting place like this training. Yo thinks Wall has no choice but to seclude himself, especially after the real ones put all the blame on him. Yo gets impatient and shouts for Wall. Wall appears out of nowhere and asks why they're looking for him. Wall has scared them all, and he asks again. Yo says they just wanted to talk. She wants to know about the restriction. Yo knows that Wall knows about the restriction and says he wasn't there when everyone else collapsed. But when everyone regained their senses, he was there right beside them. That means Wall appeared after the restriction was activated. Yo was able to put together that the restriction had little to no effect on Wall. Then Min remembers when she was in pain. She was able to endure it because someone infused internal energy into her. She wonders if that someone was Wall. Yo pressures Wall again and asks if he knows. Wall finally admits that he does. He tells them that he knows exactly what kind of restriction they placed on them. Yo demands that he tell them what it is, but Wall doesn't want to. He asks why he should. Why should he go out of his way to help them, and what is the benefit to him? Yoke gets angry and says this isn't how someone treats their comrades. Comrades wouldn't chase after and attack each other with such hate, he says. Yoke sees Wall's perspective and swears from now on they can be comrades no matter what happens. He will always consider him to be a friend. Everyone sees right through that, and Wolf says he's got to do more to earn his trust. Yoke invites him to the public floral performance troupe if they ever regain their freedom. This way, Yoke will be able to help him at least a little. Yo jumps in and says she'll also consider Wall a friend if he helps. She also adds that everyone in her group will never show him hostility. Min, feeling left out, says she will never betray Wall. Feeling fed up with all these lies, Wall spits out that the restriction is cursed poison. They ask for clarification. Wolf says they were all poisoned by cursed poison. It's a type of poisonous organism that normally lays dormant in their bodies, but it releases poison in response to the sound waves of the hell flute. The poison flows through their blood vessels and attacks their internal organs. Yo then asks how Wall could withstand the poison. Wall says he's normally resistant to poison, so it doesn't have a strong impact on him. He says he's told them everything they'd need to know, and they can figure out how to remove the cursed poison on their own. Wall doesn't want to give them the full truth, as that could create countless variables. Yo thanks him for the information and says he can come to her if he ever needs anything. Wolf says he may take her up on that one day, and they turn away. But Min catches Wall and tells him her real name is Lee Sol Min. Well, he doesn't understand why he needs to know that, but she says she just wants him to remember it later. The first sword announces that they will be leaving the cave today. The trainees are happy to hear that, but they're still not sure if that's true. The first sword calls for Yo and tells her she's responsible for leading the others outside. She understands her mission, and the basket descends from the ceiling. As the real ones leave, they wonder how many of their trainees will survive. They train them well, but their target is a martial artist with the highest level of talent in the Jing. The first sword is relieved, though, as his job is now done and he can retire. The real ones make it outside, and the trainees are ecstatic. This is the day they've waited so long for. Yo takes charge and begins constructing their exit. Wall is relieved but still feels it's too good to be true. Yo approaches Wall and asks him if he's ready for their mission. He says he is and asks about the curse poison. Yo says they were detoxified because Min knew a lot about poison. Most of the others have finally left, and Yo says it's their turn to go. The basket drops one last time, and they get on. As the basket ascends, Wall looks down at the place where he spent the last 7 years. They were so deep underground, it may have been hell. They get close to the exit, and Wall thinks to rip his arm sleeve off. They need to cover their eyes as they haven't seen daylight in years. The others realize they could be blinded and follow suit. The light gets stronger as the basket ascends, but they finally make it out before they could even look out. A man approaches the basket. We seem to have made some useful ones, he says. Wolf's eyes still haven't adjusted, and the man says the requester will be satisfied. He can't see him, but Wall thinks his voice sounds like it's void of emotions. He assumes this man is in an executive position from the way he talks. He must be the captain of the Blood Shadow Group, Wolf thinks. He is correct. He is Gu Yong, the Blood Shadow Group captain. Gu orders for them to be moved to the Clear Wind Manor. As they're being taken to the carriage, Wall looks back at Gu. He's memorized his voice. They reach the manor, and Gu tells the trainees that this is where they will be acclimated to the outside world. He warns them not to let their guard down or he will take care of the consequences himself. Wall was placed in a dorm with Go and Yoke. Wall tells his new roommates that he's going to wash up at the well. Wall bathes, and he's feeling refreshed. He lays in the grass and takes in the beautiful nature. He spends the night out in the grass and wakes to a beautiful day. The others admire a flower they've never seen before. They can't believe they lived to see something so beautiful once again. But as they're rejoicing, here comes Captain Gu. He drops some weapons on the ground in front of the trainees. He says they'll now be distributed weapons and need to keep them safe. They will be using them soon, he says. Later, in the palace, we see Gu and the First Sword having a meeting. Gu is thanking his uncle, the First Sword, for all his hard work. The First Sword says he was just doing his job. Gu says the Blood Shadow Group is prosperous thanks to the First Sword's hard work and asks how he can repay him. But the First Sword says there is no favor to repay. If it weren't for the previous head, he'd already be dead. Gu then grants his uncle the option to retire, and the option is also available for the second and third sword. These are the words the First Sword has waited 7 years to hear. He then admits to his nephew that the trainees are truly a waste. They are too talented to throw away after one use. Gu shares the same belief, but he says he has no choice. The relationship with the trainee has to end here. The First Sword asks Gu if he knows who requested the objective. Gu says he doesn't know, but there's no reason to question anyone willing to pay 500,000 yuan for a request. Gu then envisions the Blood Shadow Group becoming the greatest assassin group in the world. Completing the objective would put them ahead of the 100 Wrath Union. After the meeting, we see Wall preparing for his mission with Yoke and a few other assassins. Yoke asks Wall if he's nervous, and Wolf says he is a little, but they've spent so much time together now that Yoke can tell when Wall is lying. Wall accuses Yo of being nervous because of how much he's talking. Like always, Yoke gets defensive. Yoke says he wants nothing more than to get revenge on someone for his last 7 years of suffering. The group of assassins is now called to begin their mission. They are told they will now be stealthily moving somewhere. This is what Wall has been waiting for. They head out into the night and follow the Fourth Sword. The newly trained group is keeping up with the Fourth Sword, and he's impressed. They've clearly been trained well. He also believes how much of a waste their talent would be after being disposed of. They reach their targeted location, and the Fourth Sword instructs them to hide out here for now. The assassins all hide, and the Fourth Sword tells them their objective lies within that mountain. He begins describing the mission and says once they climb the mountain, they will see a manor that looks exactly like the one they were living in underground. Among the buildings, the man inside the Bright Moon Palace is their target. The assassins are anxious to get started as they have that building memorized. Wall is the only one in the group who knows their target is Wu Gun Seng. We're now brought to a woman staring off into the distance. Her name is Young, and she's admiring some flowers. One stands out to her. She reaches out to touch it, and the flower immediately evaporates. As Young processes what just happened, she hears someone calling for her. It's Sol Ran. Ran is the enemy sect leader, and she wants to know what Young was doing outside alone. Young responds that she was just trying to catch the nice breeze. Ran asks Young if she still resents her. Young says not necessarily, but her life is on the line with this request, and she would have liked to have been excused from it. Ran is disgruntled and doesn't appreciate Young's attitude. Ran tells Young she must have forgotten who brought her in when she was just a beggar on the streets. She says she better not want to be excused after everything she's done for her. Young apologizes and doesn't want Ran to be upset, as it's bad for her health. Ran says if they don't receive an answer today, they will carry out their initial plan. Young agrees, as she's always ready to follow her master. As the conversation ends, a messenger comes running with news. The messenger tells Ran that they have accepted the proposal. This is great news for the sect, and Ran tells Young the fate of their sect now rides on her performance. Young assures Ran that she has nothing to worry about. Ran thinks to herself how disappointed she is that she must waste a talent like Young as a political tool instead of her successor. The messenger asks Ran what they should do regarding the other matter. Ran asks if she's referring to the objective for 500,000 Young. Only time will tell what Ran has in store for the Blood Shadow group. We now see Wall waking up and wondering if it's still morning. He knows the mission will be carried out at night, so they still have some time left. He lays back down to rest, but something doesn't feel right to him. Suddenly, a spear drops down and strikes one of the other assassins. Wall is in shock as he and the other assassins are under attack. The story continues, and we see a monk named Yu spiking his spear into the ground. He's trying to figure out if something is there. He pulls his spear out of the ground, and his suspicions were correct. He's discovered that assassins are hiding around the mountain. Yu looks to his men and says the Ching Chang sect is being invaded. He wants them to find all the assassins and eliminate them. Wall knows he and the others are at a disadvantage. They decide retreating is their best option to survive. The monks begin spearing random areas in the ground, hoping to find an assassin using their special abilities. But one of the monks gets too close and the assassins jump to the sky. They plan to disperse and regroup once they get out of the encirclement. The monks aren't going to let them off easy, though, and chase after them. Yu ferociously throws his spear and lands one of the assassins. Yu calls for another spear and immediately claims another assassin. He takes another spear and gets another assassin. This is almost too easy for Yu. Wall's partners are dropping like flies, and Mola is the only assassin left now. Yu takes his last throw, and it's heading right for Wall. Wall catches the spear and fires it right back. The spear blows past the other monks, and it's heading right for Yu. As the monks turn to watch the spear fly past them, Wall takes this as his opportunity to attack the group of monks closest to him. The spear is heading to Yu so fast it just grazes his ear. This infuriates Yu, and he wants them to hunt Wall down until he's lifeless. Wall is outnumbered now without his partners and decides it will be best to run away. As Wall runs for his life, he tries to figure out how the monks knew they were hiding out. He believes someone may have leaked the information, but he's the only one who knew who their target was, so it could have been the Fourth Sword or one of his subordinates. They retreated before they were ambushed. The monks catch up to Wall and hurt him with a spear. Wol goes down but fights to get back up. He didn't spend 6 years underground to lose his life like this. Wall wonders if there was conflict in the Blood Shadow group or if the requester just changed their mind. The only thing he knows for sure right now is that the Blood Shadow group has abandoned him. Wall reaches the end of the death and has to hide. However, he is leaving a blood trail. As one of the monks tries to analyze Wall's trail, Wall drops down from a tree and takes him out. He's forced to survive on his own with a group of monks chasing after him. With no other choice, Wall jumps into the river. He makes it out of the water and finds a message on one of the stones. The message is giving directions to a location 600 meters north. Wolf follows the trail and sees another message with a shorter distance. Wall is now closing in on the location. With the amount of blood on these rocks, Wall believes whoever wrote this code is badly injured. Wall hears people searching for him off into the distance. Wall starts wondering if these messages may be a setup. He knows there has to be at least 7 different clans participating by the amount of uniforms they're wearing. Suddenly, Wall feels danger and falls down to avoid a strike. As he lays flat, he looks up and sees Min. She didn't realize she was attacking Wall. She's happy to see him, but she is badly injured and collapses. Wall tries to catch her, but he can't with how much she's bleeding. He doesn't think she's going to make it. He asks where the others are, and she says most of them are dead. Wall asks about Yo and Song, but Min says she doesn't know what happened to them because they all dispersed. She recalls them taking charge and ordering their group to run while they fight. They were leaders until the very end. Wall gets emotional as his friends are losing their lives. Wall lays Min down and tells her she is going to pass away shortly. She knows but is happy she won't have to die alone. Wall asks her if she's scared to die, and he also asks her if she wants to live. Min says she wants to live and asks if Wall can save her. He says he can't, and Min says that's why she's giving up. She knows her body is in rough shape. Min is just glad she won't have to die alone. She asks Wall if he will stay with her to the end. Holding back his tears, he says he will. Min proceeds to say that after everything they went through to survive, it's hard to believe this is how it ends. She wants to know who did this to them and why anyone would do this. She hopes whoever did this to them feels the pain she feels right now. Wall tells Min it was because of Wu Gun Seng of the Ching Chang sect. Someone requested the Blood Shadow group to terminate Wu Gun. That's why they were kidnapped and raised as assassins. And now that they're useless, they're trying to erase them from the plan. Wall tells her if he can survive, he can find out who messed with their lives. He plans to find them and take revenge even if it's the last thing he does. Min can barely understand as she senses the end coming. She tells Wall that she wants him to survive for her dying wish. She wants Wall to say her name, her full name. He grants her wish and she thanks him. Min just wanted to hear Wall call her name before she left. As Min's spirit leaves her body, Wall promises to get revenge on whoever did this to them. Back at the palace, we see Gu reading a message. The fourth sword reports to Gu that the assassins will not be able to escape. As Gu reads the message, he says now it's truly a waste to throw the assassins away after all that time. The assassins won't even be able to be used because Gu has received a message saying their objective is now void. The fourth sword asks if that means that the palace is in danger, and Gu says they won't be able to find this place. He thinks it will be best to wait there until the storm passes over. Then the fourth sword asks if Gu truly doesn't know who the requester is. Gu says he can find out, but there is a line to be kept. Gu is not worried as they were kind enough to send them a message. But then the fourth sword sees the message, and he freaks out. The message was infused with tracking incense, and suddenly one of the real ones is dropped. The palace is now under attack. The first sword tries to warn the attackers and tells them to retreat as they are no match, but they refuse to back down. The fourth sword tells Gu that they must retreat, but Gu says he can't go anywhere. They're here for him, and they won't let him escape. Gu says they crossed the line, and he prepares to fight back. Gu rushes them and says they will be devoured if they bite. Gu calls for all forces to hold on a little more, but off into the distance, Gu hears someone say, "No, you won't have that opportunity." An attack is directed towards Gu, but he is able to defend. He felt so much power and asked who that person was. The woman is offended that a measly assassin wouldn't know her name. As she gets closer, Gu recognizes her as the life-ending toxic heart Manhwa. As Gu is about to ask if she was the requester, she stops him and says that she will pull his tongue if he says any more. Gu puts it together and realizes the requester was from the ME sect. He now regrets not investigating who the requester was. This choice has brought forth a disaster, but he refuses to die. Manhwa is annoyed by Gu's hope and sends another attack. Gu is again able to defend and fights back. Manhwa is impressed with Gu's level of martial art. She's glad they're fighting in daylight so Gu wouldn't be able to set up an ambush using the darkness of the night. She knows she must finish him and everyone else in the Blood Shadow group. Manhwa sends one final blast on Gu, and he can't defend that one. He knows he's going to die and fears this is the end of the Blood Shadow group. He reflects on the hard work he put into this group to rival the 100 Wrath Union, and this inspires him to keep fighting. He attacks Manhwa again, but then suddenly a third party joins in. He knows he's in trouble, and he can no longer withstand the attack. Down goes Gu, and the assassins cry out for their captain before getting speared. Manhwa turns to her master, Ran, and greets her. Ran can't believe they had such a hard time finishing these measly assassins. Manhwa apologizes and says they fought back harder than expected. Gu cries out for Ran and asks how she could do this to him after requesting his group. Gu continues to cry and accuses Ran of betrayal, but Ran has heard enough and quickly puts an end to Gu. Ran acts confused like she had no idea what Gu was talking about, and orders for her group to finish the rest. Next to go down is the first sword. He drops to the ground, yelling at Misak. The first sword knows ever since Ran became the leader, they've been raising their forces at an alarming rate. He asks for the name of the woman who just cut through him. She tells him her name is Young. He says he heard that one of Ran's disciples possessed unfathomable talent, and it must be her. Young says those are exaggerated rumors. The first sword takes his last breath and thinks it's ironic that being an assassin for decades was no match for a disciple of the ME sect. Young goes to report to her sister that the first sword has been eliminated. Now we see the fourth sword being brought to Ran. Ran asks him how many assassins he took to the mountain. He doesn't answer and asks why she wants to know. She demands the answer, but he says he doesn't know. The fourth sword says even if he knew, he couldn't tell her, especially not after everything she's done to his palace. Ran thinks his tenacity is cute and tortures him. She asks her question again, and the fourth sword says he took 28 assassins. Ran got what she needs and asks how many assassins have been eliminated from the mountain. The woman says 24 have been taken out. Ran wants the 4 left eliminated immediately as the palace is in flames. Ran turns to Young and says her role is now more crucial than ever. Ran says she will send someone to the Ching Chang sect to set a date as soon as this matter is dealt with. She also tells Young to prepare her heart and body for the wedding. Ran tells Young all of this is for the fate of the sect. Meanwhile, back on the mountain, we see Wall spying on the monks. Their security is tight at the entrance, so he plans to get through from the inside. He thinks if they want to die as natural enemies of the Jianghu, he'll just become one, a natural enemy of the Jianghu. Inside their base, we see a monk preparing to leave to collect herbs. His friends tell him to be careful because things have been restless recently. As the monk wanders the forest alone, he is attacked and put into a headlock by Wall. He tries to ask Wall who he is, but Wall draws his sword on him. Wall wounds him, and in pain, the monk wonders who would do such a thing on this mountain. Wall asks the monk if he is a disciple of the Ching Chang sect. The disciple nods. Wall wants to know the disciple's name, and he says his name is Do. He is a third-generation disciple of the Ching Chang sect. Wall asks Do what kind of man Wu Gun Sang is. Do panics and asks if he's talking about senior brother Wu Gun Sang, the Lone Star of Ching Chang. Wall wants to know what Do meant by calling him the Lone Star of Ching Chang. Do says senior brother Wu Gun Sang is the greatest prospect that the Ching Chang sect has ever birthed. He mastered most of the Jing sect's martial arts and has reached a very high stage. Do has heard that former masters of the Ching Chang sect have shown interest in him and are giving him their teachings. Wu Gun Sang is the Ching Chang sect's prospect, well thanks to himself. Now he understands why they spent all that time training. Do asks Wall to spare his life since he's told him everything he knows, but when he turns around to look at Wall, he gasps. Wall is transforming, and Do is scared for his life. He has no idea what Wall is doing, and when he looks back at Wall again, he sees himself. Do is confused and tries to think of what Wall is plotting. Back at the monk's base, the guards up front are surprised to see Do has returned so quickly. Do says he's back because he forgot something. Do walks through the entrance, and it almost seems like a new world to him, and that's because it is. Wall has morphed himself into the disciple Do. Wall makes his way through the base and searches for Wu Gun Sang's residence. Wall was able to quickly find where Wu Gun Sang lives in the Ching Chang Palace. In a meeting held by the Ching Chang sect, the leader is asking if the situation outside has calmed down. His second-in-command, Jin, says the tracking of the assassins seems to be nearing its end. The sect leader is still appalled that mere assassins dared to attack their sect. Jin says someone must have plotted this. The sect leader asks if he knows who could have plotted this, but Jin says they lack information. But he sent some disciples to gather information. Then the sect's greatest warrior chimes in and says this act is unforgivable. He wants to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Jin assures him not to worry. Then, the sect leader reminds everyone of the war of heaven and demons. In the moment of danger when the Jianghu was about to be overrun by the Celestial Demon Union, the extraordinary martial artist Li Guok formed the Providence Alliance. Those who opened their doors to participate, the Shaolin Temple, the Wudun sect, and the Manhua sect, accomplished great feats and regained their former glory. Those who sealed their doors and did not participate, such as the Ching Chang sect and the Emi sect, only earned the empty name of the great family of Sichuan and cannot hold a candle to them. In actuality, the sect leader says if they desire to catch up to the others, they cannot hold back and must stay focused. Once again, Jin warns everyone not to worry. He says if things go according to plan, they will be caught up within a few years. The sect's greatest warrior likes the sound of that and asks how Jin's son Wu Gun Sang is doing. He knows he hasn't shown himself to the outside world at all. As far as they know, he has isolated himself to focus on his training with the thought of atonement. Jin apologizes for not being able to raise his own son properly. The sect's greatest warrior says it's all right, it's understandable for a boy his age, and there's no need to apologize for something that has already been taken care of peacefully. Jin says he will make sure that he pulls himself together. The sect's greatest warrior says whatever society says, there's no denying that Wu Gun Sang possesses true talent. He also says if he's raised right, he won't fall behind the successors of the 3 great sects. Then the sect leader intervenes and says he heard Jin has accepted the Emi sect's proposal of marriage for Wu Gun Sang. Jin says that it's true. The sect leader says marriage with the Emi sect is not bad and asks if the bride is the disciple of Ran. Jin says that she is her youngest disciple. He also says there are rumors that she possesses both beauty and intelligence, not a bad match for Wu Gun Sang. But he still has some concerns because of Ran. Ran is desperate to catch up to the Ching Chang sect. If Gunsang marries her youngest disciple, they may be the ones to be devoured. That's why Jin has rejected the proposal until now. But the sect's greatest warrior comforts him and says they have no choice. They can't continue to be enemies with the Emi sect in such a small territory. Since Wu Gunsang is the only hope of the Qing Chang sect, he's given very special care.